How's it going? My name's Luca, and today I'm going to show you how to make house music. First of all, if you want to follow along with the video today, there's a link in the description that has the Ableton project file as well as some samples that I'm going to be using in the video. So make sure you download that one first, but otherwise, let's jump into it. Alright, so there's two main ways to start a house track. First of all, you could try starting with drums first and percussion and building from the groove and the percussion first. That's what we're going to be doing today. Or you could start from a focal point. So a lot of house tracks might start from a sample, something they've sampled, or maybe it's a vocal, or maybe it's a synth line or something like this. Either way, there's going to be a big emphasis on drums and percussion today because house is a very rhythmic oriented genre. So we're going to start today with the drums. I've loaded up my sample pack over here, and I've got a drums group here with 3 subgroups within it. So these are the 3 groups that need to go into a house drum loop to make it sound professional. So first of all, we need the fundamentals. We need the skeleton, the backbone. So we've got the kick, the clap, and the open hat. We're going to talk about these in a moment. We've also got the 16th note hi-hat, which is going to be really important for rhythm and energy. Moving on, we're going to need some syncopation. Syncopation is important for groove and that push and pull in house music. And then we're also going to need some depth, and this is just going to make our drums sparkle and sound a lot more professional. So first things first, let's pull up this group here and sort of just load our samples, our kick, our clap, and our open hat into these tracks here. I'm going to be using MIDI in this case, and that is because these elements are looping over and over. So if we ever need to change it, it's a lot easier to do in MIDI. So I've clicked on this kick track here, and I can just double click this, and it's going to load it in there. I'm going to go to the clap, double click that as well. And I'm also going to go to the open hi-hat and grab this open 909. And just for a change, let's just drag it in this time. So now we need to program the MIDI. I think the easiest way to do this is just to make a 1-bar MIDI clip in the kick track. Click here and drag to the left, and that's going to highlight this section. Hit Command D 3 times, and then just loop this over. And now I'm going to hold Option on my Mac keyboard and duplicate this twice. So I'm just clicking and dragging whilst I'm holding Option, and that'll duplicate it. You can also copy paste if you like. Now this just makes putting the MIDI notes in way easier, because if for the clap, I can just delete these 2 and I've got the clap MIDI. And for the open hat, I'm just going to highlight all of these and just move them over. So now we've got this structural foundation in here, right? My default tempo is at 137, so I'm just going to bring that down to maybe 130. This is pretty quick for house music, but it doesn't really matter. And I'm just quickly going to mix these a little bit. So let's try the clap. Put it down a little bit. Open hi-hat. Turn that down a little bit. And now I'm going to go into the open hi-hat onto the sustain and just turn down the sustain. That's going to make it a little bit more snappy as well. Bring up the decay a little bit. And that's what I'm going to start with. I'm also going to turn down the sustain for my clap. Make it a bit more crisp. Now I can probably turn it up a little bit as well now. And these are my fundamentals. This is non-negotiable. This is like the skeleton. All of house music will have some sort of kick, clap, or snare, and offbeat hi-hat like this. 16th note hi-hats are really important in house music because they provide a lot of energy. As I add this 16th note hi-hat, you'll see that it actually start to glue all of these elements together. So that's the one I'm going to use. And this time I'm going to make a 1/4 bar MIDI clip. So 4 of this 16th notes, and I'll show you why. Pencil tool, hit B, and just drag on the C3 note all the way across. I'm just going to copy this over. This is what we're aiming for, you know, a hi-hat on every 16th note. First thing I'm going to do is, again, bring down the sustain. And I'm also going to go into the MIDI clip here and apply some swing. So if I go to this groove tab and hit this hot swap button, I'm just going to scroll down over here and look for swing 16ths. So I've already highlighted the one that I wanted to use. And what they're going to do is shift the MIDI notes around so it swings. So it adds a little bit of groove. I'm going to use this 64 one. And as soon as I double click that, it's going to apply it over here. Let's have a listen to that with the group as well. The next thing I'm going to do is pull up these velocity sliders and play around with these. So this is really important. I would highly, highly recommend just playing around with what the different velocity patterns that you can make and what differences in groove they create. So let's go for an up-down feel right now and see what that does. And again, I would just recommend experimenting around with seeing what different grooves you can make with these velocity bars like this. I quite like that one. So these are the core fundamentals of our house drum loop. We need our skeleton. We also need our 16th note hi-hat, which is just gonna bring everything together. Let's just collapse this for now and bring up our syncopation group. And now is when we start adding a little bit of groove into our loop. So the next element I'm gonna be adding in is this snare snap. So maybe I can just drag it over here. If I actually look at the house foundation, these fundamentals here, this skeleton, right? If I'm looking in terms of 16th notes, you'll notice that the first 16th note of every quarter note or every beat, every kick drum is going to have a kick drum on it. Again, the second quarter note is going to have a kick drum. Third quarter note is going to have a kick drum. This is the first 16th note of every beat. Again, the bars are divided by the kick drums, which is 4 of them per bar. And every quarter is called a beat and is divided into 4 16th notes. So the first 16th note has a kick drum. The third 16th note has this open hi-hat here. And what you'll notice is the second and the fourth one don't actually have anything on them. These are what we call the syncopated spots. So if we accent the second or the fourth one, we create a little bit of push, a little bit of pull, and we create this groove and this sense of syncopation. So a groove is really built off accenting the syncopated spots. And we're gonna keep this in mind as we're building up our loop. So I've got my snare snap here. I'm just gonna cut that and I'm gonna listen to my track, my loop, what we have so far. I'm gonna try and find a spot to put it. So let's just try this one. This is the 4th 16th note of the second beat. Have a listen to what that is doing. See how it just slots in between the open hi-hat and the kick drum nicely? So every syncopated spot, which is the second and the fourth one, this one and this one and this one and this one, we're going to need to swing all of those. So to swing something in audio, I'm just going to drag it off the grid slightly. I'm going to hold Command on my Mac keyboard and just drag it to the right slightly, just something like this. And once I've done this once, I don't need to do it again. Just need to highlight that, copy it, paste it over here, and let's have a listen to what this sounds like. So you can see it's sort of like pushing you towards this kick drum here, and it's like pulling away and it's creating this movement. So again, really understanding this is going to come down to how much you really experiment with this stuff. So if I highlight the 16th notes again, I would recommend just dragging these around. Let's drag these onto these 16th notes over here and these syncopated spots. Let's try and hear what these syncopated spots sound like instead. So the different spots are going to have different effects. So we've got this so far. And I'm going to add some more syncopation. So there's lots of different things that we can add for syncopation. Claps, snares, we can use closed hi-hats. It's nice to use different tones, emphasize different syncopated spots with different tones. It essentially doesn't matter too much what tone you add. If you're hitting those syncopated spots and you're adding a little bit of swing in there, then it's going to provide a new flavor to the groove. So just for a purpose of example, I'm just going to grab this closed hi-hat here and just put it onto some syncopated spots and let's see what it does. Something like this. Let's see what that does. Maybe something like this. In fact, I want to put it here instead. And I think I quite like that actually. I'm going to duplicate that over. So it's going to be sounding like this now. I'm going to add one more audio track and go grab my low tom and just drag that in over here. And let's try and find a spot for this one as well. So I'm just going to have a listen to my loop and see if something jumps out at me. Maybe something like this. In fact, I might just delete this first and third one, and that's just going to make it so it's happening a little bit less often. And then sort of just in this section in here. So even though this isn't actually playing on a syncopated spot, it's actually offering a nice little bit of groove. In fact, I'm going to make one more track here, and that's because I want to add in this soft open hi-hat. Right? So I'm going to drag this in here, and let's have a listen and try and find a spot for this. Just turn that down first, maybe drag it over here. I'm gonna make sure I'm in 16th notes and just sort of try out all the different 16th notes. That actually works really well. Maybe try this one. I think maybe this one. Maybe we could put it where this hi-hat is and just take out this one and see what that does. Oh yeah, I quite like that. So I think I'm actually going to duplicate that over so it plays every 2 bars. And I'm also going to mute or delete every second one of these claps, because now we've just put an open hat where that closed hat would be, so I can just delete that. We don't need it anymore. I'm also going to turn this down a little bit more and just pan it to the left. So now it comes to our depth group. We're going to be adding just a little bit of ear candy, a little bit of texture to our loop. It's just to make it a bit more interesting. So first of all, I'm actually going to add a audio track and grab my texture crackle here. And this is just going to provide a little bit of background interest. You're not really going to notice it too much because we're going to turn it down nice and quiet all the way in the background. I'm also going to EQ out the low end. I've also got this texture snare that I want to use, and I think I might just layer that with the clap itself. So what I'm going to do is actually duplicate this and just drag it into the texture loop. So I was just holding Option there to duplicate that track. And I'm actually going to grab the texture snare sample this time, just load it up instead. And so you'll hear that that is playing at the same time as the clap now. But what I'm actually going to do is go into the MIDI clip and just delete this first one. I'm going to zoom in here and go into this texture snare in here and just drag the endpoint. Also going to turn the volume up a little bit. So we're just adding a little bit of texture. So let's layer that with the clap again. You can see that the first one sounds a little bit different to the second one. So those small differences are just going to add a nice amount of depth to your track. One more thing that we're going to add is the 909 ride, and this is just going to provide another optional element that I can step up the energy and build towards if I want to. So I'm just going to add a 1-bar MIDI clip and switch my grid into 8th notes this time. I'm just going to make 2 8th notes over here, and I'm just going to drag down the velocity of the first one. And that's going to make this pumping pattern with the ride sound. So this is just a classic house technique, just making a pumping 909 ride. Just sounds like this. And if I play it with my fundamentals here, so the fundamentals plus the ride, it actually layers with the open hat really nicely, right? So this is what we have so far. Let's have a listen. Turn off that ride. So this is what a house drum sounds like, and it's consisted of the fundamentals, that house structure, you know, the kick, the clap, and the open hat, as well as the 16th note hi-hat, which glues everything together, provides a little bit of energy as well. We have our syncopation, which is providing the groove, the push, and the pull. And then we also have our depth. And if we have all of these 3 things checked in our drums, it's going to make making house music so much easier for you, because the drums is really the most important point. And then when it comes to the bass line and the synths, you can really just experiment and have fun. So now we're going to move on to the bass line. First of all, I'm going to go into my instruments tab and pull up the operator. And I'm going to make a very simple bass patch, which I've made many times before. So I'm going to firstly go over here and click this button, which outputs each of the operators individually. And we're just going to make a square wave on one of them and a sine wave, a saw wave on the other. And we're just going to output them just straight out into a filter, just do a little bit of filtering, and that is all. You just need to make sure your envelope, the sustain, is all the way up here. And I'm also going to go into the filter, bring the filter down, and maybe add a little bit of envelope. And that's it. That's what we're going to do for the bass. Like, the bass line's very simple and it's just going to work. Sounds like this. So very meaty. If you want a bit more attack, you can just bring up this envelope. And let's just listen to our drums here. and input a bassline rhythm that is super simple and it just works with what we've got in the drum. So the more simple it is, the more likely it's going to work, just because when there's less notes, there's more space and just makes the whole process much easier. So I'm just going to make a 1-bar MIDI clip and just put a few notes in and just listen for a few notes that might work. First of all, I'm going to find a note that I like. Oh yeah, down here. That's a nice one. F is good. And now it comes to, again, the 16th note grid. Just experiment around with which notes sound good. So if I was to put it on the first 16th note, it's going to be hitting at the same time as the kick drum, and it's not essentially going to sound good unless you want it to be like that. So it actually sounds really subby when you put it on the first kick drum. If I was to sidechain that to the kick drum, then this note would work. But I want a little bit more syncopation and a little bit more groove in my loop. So maybe we could try this second one. Maybe we could try the third one. Oh, so that's like exactly offbeat with the kick drum. So it's really easy to hear and it's really clear. So I really like that one. So I'm gonna also play around with a few more notes. So maybe I could put one here as well. I'm actually gonna go over to my groove and apply this as well. So maybe something like this. Again, staying really simple. I'm actually going to delete this note. Let's just have a listen to this. See, I think that works really well. So I'm also going to try maybe a note here. Let's see what that sounds like. So we've actually got our, in our syncopation group, we've got our low tom here, right? So if I zoom into this low tom, you can see that that is actually playing at a really nice spot right between these notes. So you can see that simplifying my melody allows for these gaps, which also allows for this syncopation that I've already added in my drums to just slot nicely. So I think that this rhythm is actually working really well with all the syncopation in my loop, and especially this low tom. So let's just have a play here and just have a look at this low tom and how it slots really nicely in here. So now we've got the rhythm. I'm just going to build upon this rhythm and make some slight variations and also make some melodic variation as well. So I'm just going to click up here and hit Command D to duplicate the length of the loop. And let's just play around with some notes. So first of all, I'm actually going to put everything up an octave, and that's just so I can actually hear the notes because when they're down low, it's kind of hard to hear them. So I think that note kind of works, so that maybe we can put it back down. And now we can make some more slight variations. So something like this. Maybe we could even go up to A over here. Again, I'm just going to check this up an octave. So I'm going to put this back down. Let's have a listen. I think that last note, we can just bring that down as well. So something like this. So the bassline melody is sounding good now. And what I'm gonna do is just add a little bit of erosion to this bass line just to thicken it up a little bit. So just add a little bit of noise to this. Again, duplicate this and add a little bit of noise in the upper harmonics as well. Maybe just bring the width up. And that just nicely thickens up that subtone there. So let's play that with the loop as well. So a really simple bass line that just started with those 3 notes that we looped over and over. And then we just have a little bit of melodic variation over the course of 4 bars. The interesting thing to notice here is we don't actually need sidechain in this case because we've positioned all the notes. None of them are playing at the same time as a kick drum. So we don't need to sidechain it to the kick. So now we're going to make some synths, but the process from here on is really experimental. You know, all of the rules, all of the analytical stuff is more or less done. The foundation is there, and now we just have fun messing around with a few different presets and playing around with some notes just to see if we can find something we like. So I've got this preset from Operator. It's a pad preset called Climb Chord Pad. I've added a little bit of reverb to it. It sounds like this. And I'm just gonna see if I can play something that sounds good with the loop that we have so far. Maybe I'm gonna copy this down to F as well. So I've recorded this pad in here now, and it's providing us with a nice little bit of space in the background. So now I'm just gonna think about sort of a main idea, a main element that I can put in the track. I think I'm gonna try out the trusty Korg M1. If you know about the Korg M1, then you probably know about the organ tone that it has. I've used it in my tutorials in the past. It sounds like this. And this is a classic house tone. So we're just gonna stay safe and use one of these and see what we can do. So if you're following along and you have the Korg M1, on this preset, you'll notice that the top half is piano. So just to make it all organ tone instead, I'm just gonna mute this piano here, click onto this organ bass, go into MIDI, and just go to the key zone, just extend the key zone out. So now we have. So I'm gonna make a MIDI clip. I'm just gonna start with my F note here and just try and find a rhythm that works. The exact same way that I made the bass line, I'm just gonna try and find a rhythm first and then sort of pitch the notes around later. Maybe something like this, just shorten these two. If I just loop that out. So you can see that this rhythm is similar to the bass line, but a little bit different, and it works with the groove that we've got so far. So it's just the important thing first is just to find a rhythm that works, and then you can sort of worry about the notes later. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually go over and grab the MIDI chord effect. And I'm just going to make minor chords out of the notes that I already have. So let's just play this. I'm going to go to Shift 2 and turn that up 3 semitones. And then go to Shift 3 and turn that up 7. So it's going to create a minor chord off any note that I play. And it's a really classic house technique to just transpose minor chords around. It doesn't necessarily have to be exactly in key, but it'll give us this really cool house feel. So maybe I could put this one up an octave. So the bass line shifts up to a different chord over here. It goes up to the A over here. Maybe we could experiment around with pitching these notes up a little bit. I think this is sounding nice so far. Maybe something like this. We also need to apply the groove to this as well. I think this is sounding really nice so far. What we can also do is add a delay as well. So grab my delay and just bring that down a little bit. And one last thing, I'm gonna grab a filter as well. So I think I might actually bring this last note down a bit. So what I'm actually going to do is duplicate the length of this loop because I want this last note here to go up. And then I want this one to go down. All right, so I've just added this vocal in here as well. Let's have a listen to this. So this vocal is from the Technique Sounds Deep House Vocals pack. And so with all of these ingredients in here, I could keep adding more elements, but we pretty much have everything we need for a nice house track. So I'm just gonna do a very, very quick arrangement for you and we'll see how we go. So firstly, what I'm gonna do is just duplicate everything over 1, 2, 3 times. And I'm just gonna delete a whole bunch of stuff. So I've just got the kick drum and the vocal right now. So we need a bit more than that. I'm going to bring the bass line back in. Let's see, have a listen to this. And I'm gonna bring the pads back in as well and see how this goes. I think I'm going to just turn the feedback up even more so this just keeps ringing out. What I'm gonna do is put another vocal here, but this time I'm gonna swap everything. So the kick comes out, but all of the drum elements come back in. So let's have a listen to this. All of our drum elements come back in, but I don't want the ride to be playing because it's a little bit too much. Maybe I could even take the clap out. Let's see how that goes. And then maybe something like this, where I delete everything before it comes into the drop. I have this last open hat still ring over. So what I'm gonna do is just EQ out the low end of this Korg M1, and then I'm just gonna duplicate this clip over twice, and I'm just gonna filter it in. I'm gonna filter it in with this auto filter here. So maybe I'll actually just shorten this a little bit more and start bringing it in somewhere around about here. So I'm gonna automate this filter movement, and the best way to do this is actually to do it by hand, in my opinion. Unclick this red button over here and hit record, and then just move the knob by hand. So now you can see it's being automated to come in like this. I'm gonna make a few more adjustments and then we're gonna be all good to go. So I'm just gonna maybe delete these pads here in this section and see how this goes. I'm also gonna wait to bring in this ride as well. So let's have a listen to this. Maybe I could just bring in the vocal one more time and just turn off this echo here so it doesn't keep ringing out. So you can see that this is pretty much all we need. We just need to hit all those spots in the drums that we've talked about at the start of the video. We need a nice bass line. In this case, I've made a nice syncopated bass line. Some pads, a little bit of space, you know, some left and right, some things happening in the stereo spectrum. So I've got a nice echo that's ringing out. I've got a nice pad here in the background. And then I've got my sort of main element here, which is just my classic organ tone, making some minor chords here with this chord function. And this is our house music track. So we made a little bit of a build up into this drop here. It's a very simple arrangement. I could have done a lot more here. I could have done a lot more automation, a lot more movement would fit this track really nicely. Again, if you want to access the project file, there's a link in the description for that one. But I hope you've enjoyed the video today. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel if you have. Otherwise, thanks for hanging out, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.